Hello and welcome to the Rankers podcast, where we literally rank anything and everything. Just two best friends ranking it up. My name's Nick.
And my name is Jacob. Let's rank them.
Let's rank them. What up, Jacob? How's it going?
What is up, dude? You are looking good over there. You got a little bit of some new
Dude, got some new
equipment.
tech. Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
If
Trying out a new microphone tonight. But dude, you just gave me the peace signs. You got the bandana on. Look,
yeah,
you going back to 70s or something.
I'm going back to I showered and I didn't want to do anything with my hair. That's what I'm going back to. And I found out, little fun fact, I think that ice cream makes me break out.
Interesting.
Because me and my wife did this thing at our house with these students, and we got them a bunch of ice cream and stuff for when they came over. Nice. So we had a bunch of ice cream left over. So we've just been pounding ice cream for the past 4 or 5 days.
Just like straight vanilla or chocolate out of a big tub or something?
Yeah, we got like the Mayfield thing, and but we have both just like broken out, like
interesting,
way more than normal. And so I think it's dairy. I think because we both normally don't do dairy stuff a lot. And
probably.
So anyway, that was just a fun little thing that I'll probably end up cutting out. But anyway, that's part of the reason I have like a big giant zit on my forehead under this band.
Dang, well, I wasn't trying to say that. I was just saying cool bandana.
No, I know. You nothing. It was me. But dude, Nick, this is a special episode.
This is a very special episode.
Because if you guys have been following, at the time of this recording, it's not yet, but when this episode drops, Monday the 1st was 1 year. It is the podcast's birthday.
I can't believe we've done it.
That's crazy. I've had a couple people. Awesome. I've had a couple people tell me that they're just impressed with the consistency.
Dude, I think that's been it for us. That we've just tried to be consistent with it. We kind of struggled a little bit there through the December months, but we were like, hey, we're going to come back season 2 strong, and season 2 has been strong. Season 1 was awesome.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot. We've engaged with everyone, and social media is looking better these days. We've had guests. We've done fun episodes and probably episodes that no other podcast has done. And recently we had a kind of an accomplishment. You texted it to me recently, but we are now in the top. Is it the top 10% of podcasts all time? Because we're in the top 250,000, I guess what that would be.
Yeah. So essentially what that means is there's about 2.5 million podcasts out there, and being in the top 10%, we would be within the 250,000, like you said. So cool. It seems small, but it's a really big deal because anybody can start a podcast. Right. And so we were very proud of that.
Yeah. Most definitely. Just being consistent probably helped us get there, but regardless, we got there, and we're planning on an even better next year, I guess.
Yeah. And the reason we've gotten there is because of you guys. It's because of the Ranker fam, who we dearly, dearly love. It's been really cool because we've had a lot of the Ranker fam actually on the podcast, and we are going to continue doing that. And one of the things we wanted to make you guys aware of is every August, as far as we do this podcast, we will start a new season every August. So as Nick talked about a minute ago, we had kind of a weird blip last December. December was a crazy month for me, especially I got married and graduated and all this kind of stuff. And so we decided to start season 2 in January. But me and Nick have kind of talked about it, and we've decided that we want to start a new season every August on the podcast birthday. And so this episode is actually the last episode of season 2. And the episode that will follow will be the first episode of season 3. So more things to come. Yeah. I can't wait for more guests and all the different things that we're going to do. But as the only way we know how to sort of recap and think about how much we have loved doing this podcast. Nick, what is the episode today? Our most narcissistic episode of all time.
Most narcissistic. Yes. In fact, that is exactly what we're doing. No, in a sense, we've talked about kind of doing this before, and then we just were like, man, there would be no better time than to talk about our podcasts and episodes and what we've done so far than at our year anniversary. So that is what we're doing today. We've looked at all the podcasts that we've done and all the guests that we've had and all the just random things that we've ranked and said, all right, this is the podcast that I enjoyed the most. And we did a top 5 of our podcasts. So we're doing a top 5 of the Rankers podcast today. And it's just cool. I don't know. It's a cool thing because we rank things. And so getting to rank the amount of episodes, go through our own episodes has been fun, and just looking back at who we've had on the show and what we ranked has been fun.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show, like, just that's an accomplishment in itself, that we have enough episodes that we could do this kind of ranking. And so it was really cool to be able to look back and look at, where we started and stuff. And it's still so early on, but I just got to tell you, like, whatever the feedback is, however much this podcast grows or doesn't grow, I just had a blast doing it. And I'm so excited for what's to come. But do you want to get into this list, Nick?
Yeah, man, I'd love to get into this list. You want me to start?
Yeah. I want to hear what your number 5 favorite The Rankers podcast episode is.
All right. So this one was a very, very interesting podcast for me. But coming in at number 5 for the top 5 Rankers podcast for Nick so far has been the Marvel Studios movies with Josh Lorenz.
Nice.
Shout out
Superhero Josh.
Shout out Superhero Josh. That was actually kind of a 2-parters is what we had, but we recorded it in one night.
Yeah.
And so we sat there for probably 4 or 5 hours talking about just all the Marvel movies. And what a memorable night, I think, for the Rankers podcast, because it was also, was it the first time that we had a guest, right? Or no, we had Jonah before.
No, then. Jonah was our first guest. Yeah. But they were close. They were close to each other.
Yeah. But I think, we also did it in person as well, like we did Jonah's. Because we had to eventually switch to doing remote podcasts.
Right.
But this one was it was a memorable podcast for me because, again, we sat in my basement and we went through all of the Marvel movies with Josh, and it was a 4 or 5 hour thing.
Josh ordered pizza in the middle of it. It was
Josh literally ordered pizza in the middle of it. I had a whole bowl of cereal, like just eating in front of the microphone like a bowl of cereal. So I'm sure that was great. We were like, wait, what am I listening to? Just like but so it was a good time, and I think it was a good time for the podcast because it was really the first time that we did something as extensive, because it was really broad, because we did all of the Marvel movies.
Our biggest is like 25 movies between the 3 of us.
Yeah. And that was another thing for me, is that it was really mind-blowing because it was the first podcast that we kind of did that was kind of superhero oriented, kind of like in that realm. And so, like, I really didn't know how much you guys knew about Marvel, because you're more of like a Batman fan anyways, and he actually likes Harry Potter more than he even likes Marvel.
Right.
So I was kind of taken back, I think, by how much you guys were able to talk about the Marvel movies. And I was taken back by how little I knew about the Marvel movies, because I was over there like, man, I don't really like going and watching movies for a second time. And Josh is like, yeah, I've seen Thor 15 times. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But like, that just showed me how credible like he was for that podcast.
Yeah.
And he did a great job at just going through all of those movies and giving his opinions. And so did you. And so I felt like that one had to be on my list, even though I didn't necessarily even talk that much and I was just eating a bowl of cereal. It was just a memorable moment for the Rankers podcast.
That was such a great episode, because we took a couple breaks as we were recording, and in the middle of it, we would, like, off mic, we just, like, the 3 of us started talking about life. And so me and Josh, because we had just met each other that night, and me and superhero Josh would have like these deep like conversations off mic, and then we would start back on our list and we would like just go at each other about these movies. And then Nick would like just occasionally throw something in like, I don't think Spider-Man's really that cool.
Great.
Something like that. It was, dude, such a great
I had
podcast.
to spice up the podcast.
Yeah.
But
that's a great
so
pick.
that was number 5 for me so far this year.
Nice.
What about you? What is your number 5?
Yeah, so my number 5, you're going to go ahead and see a sort of recurring theme with my list. I really love our guest episodes. Not that I don't love me and you going solo, but I think some of the camaraderie and some of the banter and stuff that we've been able to have with our guest episodes have been really fun. So my number 5 is actually, you mentioned it, our very first guest is our top 10 college football quarterbacks of the 2000s with Jonah Chitwood. And so Jonah Chitwood is my best friend, one of the closest guys in my life, and he is a huge college football fan. We've watched a lot of college football together and talked about it a lot, and so we thought bringing him on that pod was a good idea, and it turned out to be a great idea because he really brought the money. I mean, he had a lot of great insight. That's one of the biggest like research pods that I've had to do. As far as like just figuring out, I had to take, because like Joe Burrow's my guy, and so I had to take bias out of it. So I really had to pay attention to
Did you take bias out of it though?
I think I did. If I didn't, he'd be number 1. That's true.
That's true.
But go back and listen to it if you haven't yet. We had a really good time. That was the birth of the notorious Johnny Manziel pick that Nick had. That we still literally, me, you, and Jonah talked about that the other day. And so
it's still not as good as Steve Kerr pick, but
no, Steve Kerr is the OG, but Johnny Manziel was a good follow-up. I thought that list had a lot of diversity too, which added a great which added a great just kind of content within the episode. And Jonah was a great guest. Definitely have him back on again, maybe soon. And the college football QBs episode is my number 5. I had a great time with that one.
That was a good time. And that was also another one where all 3 of us were kind of in the same spot.
And my small bachelor pad home before I got married. It was like this big.
Well, and I drove like an hour to get to you, and it was like just absolutely pitch dark, and I couldn't see where I was going on these back roads of North Georgia.
That's right. I
was like, dude, what is going on, Jacob?
I brought you to the hick town, man. That was a fun time.
Yeah, that was a good podcast. I enjoyed it. I think we definitely learned more about college QBs. I realized with that episode though, that like a lot of college QBs have like one like shining moment.
Yeah.
And I think that was what I struggled with. Probably most that kind of led with my Johnny Manziel pick, is that I was just like, man, like some of these guys have good moments, but then there were others that had, a good career.
Great careers.
So that was a cool podcast.
That was like the Baker Mayfield thing. I mean, I had no idea until I did the research how insane his collegiate career was, because we just look at Baker Mayfield and we think of them like almost winning the championship, and then just his notorious attitude and stuff. But we didn't like, he has one of the best college quarterback career as far as a resume out of anybody. But anyway, we talked about that on the list. But why don't you go ahead and give us your number 4, Nick?
All right, my number 4 is top 5 moments of 2021.
Oh, nice.
Yes. I enjoyed this podcast for a couple of reasons. I enjoyed looking at 2021, and I kind of had a couple of different things on there. A lot of it actually was kind of sports driven, because we got to talk about the Braves winning the championship, and we got to talk about the Bulldogs winning the championship. And I've been in Georgia my whole life, the state of Georgia, and I've been a fan of these 2 teams my whole life, and I've never seen either one of them win championship, and they did it in the same year. Yeah. So that was like just really big for me, and being able to talk about that on the podcast. And we talked about like other things as far as just like how the world was being impacted. Like I think we talked about like some of the top like movies and songs. And it was just cool to, I think, just look back and kind of what we're doing with this podcast.
Right.
And just reminisce on the good times of the year. And I enjoy doing things like that. And especially just being able to talk about the championships for my sports teams is really fun. And that was actually a podcast that we did together, because it had been a minute since we were together, because we were already doing remote podcasts.
Right.
And then I happened to be up there. And so got to come see your new house with where you're living now. And that was just a good time. And we both have kind of a coffee obsession. So we were sipping on our coffees, and it felt like the OG days of the podcast. And that was just a good time to come hang out with you and do that podcast.
Yeah, as fun as that podcast was, maybe our worst audio that we've ever had, because we picked the worst possible place in my house to record that. And I remember editing that one, and that was some rough, that was really cool. That's going to be, I already have that on the schedule. That's just going to be an annual episode. I mean, I can't wait to release that at the beginning of each year. And it was really special this year because that was the closing of the long gap that we had from recording. That was our first episode that we brought back. And then since then, we've just been like, it's just been nonstop, and it's been a blast. And so I love that episode as well. That's a great pick.
And I mean, you even got to talk about getting married. You were like, man, I got married in 2021. So like,
I didn't put that. That wasn't in my ranking because I couldn't count that, but I had to talk about it because I had and it was fantastic. So
but that was a good podcast for me. I enjoyed that one. That was my number 4. So what is your number 4?
My number 4 has actually already been mentioned. It's the MCU podcast.
Okay, nice.
And so I had to put it in my top 5 because this podcast could have been 5 hours longer. I mean, I can talk about this stuff all day. It is what a lot of the listeners don't know is how much it's like when you go and see a movie and then you find out a couple months later how much of it was on the cutting room floor, like how much they actually filmed, what that didn't make it in the final cut. Well, that's how the pod was. There are like a bunch of audio clips that were cut out because I had just for time's sake, but we recorded a lot longer than the actual episode.
You were like, hey man, I had to cut like 30 minutes. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was because me and Josh would go on for so long about these
That's
movies.
why I started eating a bowl of cereal, man. I was like, man,
you're just enjoying the show. I actually went back and looked at my list because I've got like a file with all my lists because there's been a few Marvel movies that have come out obviously since then. And I was just having fun and seeing, but I was like, man, it's because I don't remember these lists just off the top of my head. I honestly have forgotten most of them, and I have I remember my number 1s and like my number 10s or 5s.
Yeah,
all the stuff in between. It's
especially with a list like that.
Well, we rank so many lists, and so it's hard to remember. But I was going back and looking. But man, having Josh on there was so much fun. And he brought really good insight and has already been back and will continue to be back as we do more superhero and most likely Harry Potter related lists and rankings and stuff. But yeah, we've already talked about it a good bit, but that's my number 4. I had a blast. I'm really passionate about the MCU and superheroes in general and movies as well. And so, like I said, I could have talked about that for hours and hours, and I literally did.
Well, and I think we are going to have to come back to that. Because Marvel's got a lot in store. I actually was talking with Luke Richter, who we've had on the podcast before. And he was listing off all the upcoming movies in the next 2 years.
Yeah, the next phase.
On having, the next phase. He read all of those out, and I was like, dude, there's some good stuff coming out. We got like 2 Avengers movies coming out in 2024, which will be crazy. So anyways,
I don't know how we're gonna do that, but we're gonna have to find a way to rank those as well.
We could potentially do just ranking the superheroes themselves, or we could, ask the community, of course. So let us know what you guys would want us to rank on the upcoming Marvel movies, or if it's just the Marvel movies in 2023, 2024. So yeah,
we could do that. Give us some ideas, but anyway, that's my number 4.
Yeah, that's a good pick. All right, so we're on to my number 3.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm not gonna lie, my number 3 is a little bit cheesy. it's the top 10 pizza franchises when Josiah wins.
Oh, yes. Such a good episode.
Dude, I don't know what okay. The reason this one is on my list and this high too is because I don't think I was expecting much from this podcast, because we do a lot of just like random food rankings. Like we've done cereals, we've done French fries, all these things. And so like pizza, I was just like, it's just another, food. Like this is fun. I'm a foodie. We can talk about some food now. And I've known Josiah, so he was kind of a guest that I brought on. So I knew his level of love for pizza was pretty high.
Insane.
And I knew that he would take it semi-seriously as far as like how he rated his pizza franchises. So I like kind of thought maybe this could be like a good podcast based on what he might have to say. But like, man, I was not expecting also like just how that podcast went, because literally all three of us did not stop talking about every pizza franchise that we talked about. We talked about how the pizzas are made. We talked about it, even when it comes down to service from these places. It
was crazy.
And you guys both have worked in pizza, which I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And so like that was just like a solid hour of talking about pizza that I was like, where did the hour go?
Right.
It was just such a good podcast, because I just think that it had a lot of just good stuff in it, as far as just knowledge that I didn't even know about pizza, but also like it was just a fun podcast. And again, like you mentioned a second ago, just having guests on the podcast I really enjoy, and so that was one of my favorite ones with the guests.
Yeah, I have gotten probably the most positive feedback from an episode has come from that one. Like I got so much positive feedback just about just kind of hitting all the bases. Like just it was entertaining. It was really well thought out. The guest was really good, and I'll never forget bringing Josiah into the chat, and he pops up and he has an Italian flag behind him. And I was like, oh, this is about to be crazy.
This is about to be crazy.
And it was, dude. That was a really fun episode. That's a great pick.
Yeah, it was. I think that he's got like a pasta, like, we should ask him to do pastas one time. But that man was more than qualified to be on that podcast. So that was a good time. So that
probably
was
one of our most qualified guests for sure. That's a great pick.
All right, man. What is your number 3?
All right, so my number 3, I'll say that I wanted to start this podcast because of this episode. It's one of my favorite hobbies, one of my greatest passions ever. It's like kind of like my dream job kind of thing. Like if I could do anything, I would do this sort of thing. But my number 3 is the top 10 favorite movies episode. And so I'm really passionate about film and about movies. And one of my favorite things to do is to watch movies. And so when I thought about starting a podcast about ranking stuff, ranking my favorite movies was something that I was thinking about at the genesis of this. And it was like, I had never actually done it before. Like I knew what my favorite movie was, and I knew what some of my favorite movies were, but I'd never taken and done my top 10. And so I never touched it until I knew we were going to do this episode. And I just had a blast doing research. I wrote out like 30 something movies, and I just siphoned them all down and brought it into our list. And then of course, having our guest, my brother-in-law, Jack, who not only is a film buff, but has a lot of film cred and works within that industry in some kind of way, was a really cool experience, because me and your list were kind of those mainstream, really classics. And though Jack had some of those, Jack brought a really good perspective of like, this movie's on my list because of these things that me and you would just never think of. And so it just combined, podcasting, which is obviously a passion of mine, with another passion of mine, which is movies. And so it had to be high up on the list. The top 10 favorite movies was a great pod.
That's awesome. Yeah, I enjoyed that podcast. I was surprised that we didn't do that podcast sooner than we did. Yeah, because it's just like, you think of what would we be ranking? It'd be like, oh, somebody, like, you always think of like, oh, ranked movies. That's like just one of the top things that you think to rank in general.
Right.
So like I thought it was interesting that we waited so long to do it. but I think it was not necessarily waiting so long. I think we were like, we wanted to do it at the right time. And I think there was no better time than having Jack on there and coordinating that podcast with him. Somebody who had some knowledge, and he talked about his time working at Disney. I don't know if he's still currently working at Disney, but he's okay, sweet.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was credible, obviously, being in that realm, because he learns a lot of he's kind of had a film background at Disney. And so I just think that he was awesome, one, to have on the podcast, and two, that's just something we should do as a ranking podcast.
Right.
We ranking movies is something we should have. So it was a necessary podcast, and it was a good one. I think I was just gonna say, I think personally, my movies were kind of mainstream, but I had a couple that were like I had Gladiator pretty high on my list.
Your Walter Mitty pick,
that was
crazy. It was mind blowing.
Yeah. Dude, I actually watched Walter Mitty, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, July 4th. I watched it or the 3rd, I think.
Oh, nice.
But watched it all the way through. I watched it with my girlfriend and her dad and and her sister. And I, the whole time I was like, so sorry, this is totally kind of off topic. You can
you're great. You're great.
But so they're scrolling through movies and they stop on Walter Mitty, and I'm like, oh, Walter Mitty, I love that movie. And they're like, oh, what is that movie? I'm like, you haven't seen it? They're like, no. I'm like, this is like one of my favorite movies. You should go listen to my podcast, by the way, but this is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we'll watch it. And they're all like kind of looking at their phones. And I'm like, nah, if we're going to watch the movie, we're going to watch this movie. I'll just put down the phones. Everybody looked at their phones anyways, but I did not. I was intently watching the movie the whole time.
Dude, I have made my in-laws probably watch every movie that's on my top 10 list, because it's just like, I love sharing those movies with people if they haven't seen them before.
Yeah, but that reminds me too. I have to still go watch some of those, especially some that Jack mentioned.
Yeah. I've got to do a couple that were on his list as well, and a couple that were on yours.
Yeah, text him and tell him to send me his list, or I can go listen to it again.
But one of the things too about that ranking was, if you don't count our Marvel episode, which was in 2 parts, that was actually our longest podcast that we had done lengthwise, and I was able to cut a good bit out. But yeah, it was our longest recording one. It was like under 2 hours, which was
that's crazy, because I felt like we were going fast, but I guess
that's what it felt like. But dude, that's a great.
That was your pick.
That was my
You're so used to segueing. Hey, dude, that's a great pick.
I'm just talking to myself, apparently.
Hey, Jacob, that's a great pick. Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, Jacob. Oh my gosh. All right, so top 2.
Yeah, we're already in the top 2. Maybe we should have done top 10.
Let's hear it, dude.
All right. This is a Nick pick.
Oh no.
I love how we can still have bad picks in our own podcast.
Right.
But this could be a bad pick, but it is the top 5 JB songs.
Oh, dude, you want to hear something crazy?
What?
Our most listens is that episode.
Wow.
You need
to send me these analytics. What the heck?
The most play. I'll send them to you. The most plays that we have on an episode is
top 5 JB songs.
Literally, I don't know why. For the life of me, I don't know why. But that's apparently a popular episode.
That piques my interest, because I feel like a lot of podcast listeners probably wouldn't be your Justin Bieber listeners,
right?
Because podcasts are, I don't know. I feel like podcasts draw a certain demographic and certain type of listener, and I feel like that wouldn't be a Justin Bieber song or Justin Bieber listener.
Yeah.
But anyways, well, that's cool to hear. Well, so that just totally credits my pick now being number 2, is that it's our most listened podcast. Let's go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so top 5 Justin Bieber songs is coming in at number 2 for me. One, because I think not only did we get to talk about Justin Bieber, which is one of my guilty pleasure artists, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's nothing guilty about it. It's fantastic.
But the fact that we were just able to talk about music was a good time, and we both have a music background, and so just talking about the certain aspects that like just kind of a past surface level, kind of diving into why we like those songs and what kind of like mashups he did or how the song came to be, or like the certain beat in it, or how actually difficult it is to like play and sing this type of song or anything like that. And so it was cool just to appreciate how good Justin Bieber is, whether people want to admit that or not. And and then also just kind of look past that into just the music as a whole. So yeah, that was a fun podcast, and I really enjoyed that. I did honestly, that was like one of the podcasts that I spent the most about like on my research, which is funny. But yeah, I literally was looking at Justin Bieber songs and how songs came to be, and like the lyrics and all that kind of stuff, probably for like a couple of days at least, just making sure I had that podcast down. Which I can admit that I haven't done for other ones, especially a food one that I'm just like, I don't know, I like Chick-fil-A fries, you know.
Obviously.
So that was a good podcast, and that's all I got to say about it. Justin Bieber, man, he's the man.
It was our first music related episode, like you said, and what's really interesting is we probably went like way deeper into that subject. Like if you go back and listen to that pod, we get into some really in-depth conversations about like melodies and different things like that. And because we're just both passionate about that, and JB he's really, really talented, and we, you know, kind of talk about that in that. We also talk about a couple of his worst moments as far as his music career in that episode, but definitely overshadowed by how much we praise him in that amount of time. And that's a really great pick. Not one that I was expecting, but also not one that I was expecting to get as much.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. That's a great pick, dude.
Yeah. So all right, so we're into your number 2.
Yeah, so my number 2 was very close to being my number 1. It was a solo episode between just you and me. It was one that we did early on. It was actually I can't remember if this was one of the 4 that we released on our first on our opening day last August. I'll have to go back and look. But my number 2 is top 10 cereals. I just had an absolute blast doing this episode.
That was I think that was the second time that we recorded.
Okay.
Because the first time we recorded, we did 2 podcasts.
Right.
And then the second time we recorded is when we did the cereals.
We did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Dude, that episode was so much fun. And I'll never forget the moment of Pops being in my top 10 and then because at the end of the episode, if you guys have listened or not, go back. At the end of the episode, we go really quick through our top 5 worst cereals, like our least favorite. And I had done this whole spiel of how much I loved Pops and all this kind of stuff. And then Nick just dropped this bomb on me. And it was like this huge, it was just really hilarious in the moment and going back. And but there was a lot of you know, diversity on that list or on that ranking between our lists and stuff. And I just remember like when I ranked these lists, when I was doing this podcast, or doing research for this podcast, I was just thinking about like how I felt walking away from an episode. Cause there's been like a couple episodes that I've walked away from and I've been like, I just wasn't really feeling that. I didn't feel super passionate about that. But I just walked away from the cereal one. Just think like, that was just so much fun. Just having that conversation.
That was a super fun podcast, man, because I had my number 1 and I went and purchased it at the store because I didn't think that you would have had it before. I'm not even going to say it because I'm not going to give it away in this podcast.
Go listen.
Got to give the plug. But so I had bought that cereal, and I had it planned for you to try it after we were done with the podcast. So that was fun. And that was like something that we posted on Instagram. But yeah, that Pops pick, that was also kind of the first time that like, we were like, okay with disagreeing with each other, because the first time that we recorded together, I think we had a little bit of nerves and we were trying to figure it out.
Oh yeah.
And so I think now if we were to do like the because we did the office episodes and then we did the point guards. Yeah. And I think now if we were to do like the point guards and I picked Steve Kerr, you'd be like, what the heck is wrong with you? But like at the time, it was like our first one, and you were just kind of like, nice, man.
That's a great pick, bro.
That's a great pick, which we say after every single one of our picks anyways.
Oh yeah.
But I think like it was just still, but then once that one happened, the cereals, and then we were just like, okay, we can disagree with each other and it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you could like Pops. But anyways.
That was it was so fun. I had a blast, and like you said, the disagreement was what made the episode really fun. Yeah, and so that comes in my number 2.
I actually heard a lot of praise for that one too. I had a lot of friends and family saying that they really enjoyed that podcast, because some of them are just, I think, can be more fun / funny than others, and so that was definitely one of those podcasts.
Right. Well, guys, before we get to our number 1, I just wanted to mention, please, if you are not following us on Instagram or Twitter, please go ahead and hit us up. Just search the Rankers Podcast. If you want to communicate with us, you can communicate with us via those platforms. Just message us, or you can always email us at therankerspodcast@gmail.com. And most importantly, please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. Like I always say, that helps us out a ton. And we just appreciate those of you who have already done that. And even if you haven't, we just still appreciate you for just listening. And so, Nick, would you like to drop what your number 1 is? Do you have any? Well, we'll do honorable mentions at the end.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and drop your number 1?
So yeah, thank you, Jacob, for giving those plugs. And then also any of these podcasts that we're mentioning in this podcast, just, go hit them up, go listen to them.
Yeah.
I hope we haven't given away too much. But if you're interested in any of them, definitely go give them a listen, even if they were a year ago.
Yeah.
But coming in at number 1 for the top 5 Rankers podcasts so far is going to be top 10 Office episodes.
Okay. So I almost was like, let's play a game and see if we can guess. And that was my number 1 choice. I was like, he's definitely going to do the Office episode.
Did you?
Our OG pod.
Yes.
The very first one.
That's exactly why I'm picking it, man, because it was our first episode.
Yeah.
And it was what got the Rankers podcast started. And I just don't think that there's any better way than celebrating our 1 year with what we did a year ago and where we started, and even just looking back at how it's gone and all the podcasts that we've done. Not to mention that this podcast was actually awesome, even though it was our first one.
It was.
Like, I honestly, that might be the podcast that I did the most research for, because I also was like nervous. I didn't know like what to expect, what we were doing. Right. And so, man, I had like a whole spreadsheet of just like all the Office episodes. I even went back and watched some. And I think it's just such a memorable episode, and I'm never going to forget it because it was the first one, and it was really fun. We talked about just a lot of hilarious moments in the Office, and a lot of just like, we talked about pranks that happened. We talked about just the camaraderie. We talked about everything The Office, and all of our picks were awesome. And
we found out about your love for Jim and Pam.
Yeah,
you're a Jim and Pam guy.
Jim and Pam guy.
Yeah.
And you're kind of a Michael guy.
But
not giving away anything. Go listen to our podcast.
Go listen, dude. That was such a fun episode, and it was the original one.
It's the OG, and it's what got us kicked off. And I just think, man, if I'm going with a favorite podcast, it's gonna be how we got this thing started.
That's a great pick. I love that. Great pick, Jacob.
Great pick, Nick.
No, dude, I can't disagree with anything you said. I mean, that was just because it was also just the fact that we were there, and we had because when you start a podcast, if you want it to be remotely, good in any, you have to do some preparation. And so we had spent time preparing and getting our equipment together and navigating, and we didn't want to do it until we knew we could release it. Right. And so that was kind of a huge day because we knew that we were there recording. We knew that we could actually do this thing and that we were ready to go. And there was I can't remember how long it took to come up with that being our first episode, but it was just such a great way to start, I think.
And I just want to say, Ranker fam, hats off to Jacob. He has really put a lot into this podcast. I have too, of course, but Jacob is the one who actually edits pretty much every podcast so far. And so I just want to say, man, thank you for doing that. And the Ranker fam appreciates you for just editing and making sure that we're putting a good product and a fun product out there. And so it was kind of a vision that you had and a vision that you told me about. And I was like, dude, let's freaking do this. So I just want to say, man, I'm happy for you and I'm happy for us. And it's just been a good time. And I look forward to what's to come.
Dude, thank you. Thank you so much for those words. That is very, very kind of you. And that is not, you have worked really, really hard in a lot of ways. And I couldn't do this without you, brother. And so much sappy stuff. I'm so emotional. I'm gonna
Sorry,
cry.
I didn't mean to do that.
I appreciate your words, brother. We're gonna keep this thing going.
So let's hear Jacob Bell's #1 podcast.
Yeah. So my #1, like I said, when I was putting this list together, I kind of went off of like just how I felt when we got done, like looking back at the recording process and just doing that list and the whole thing put together, and then sort of the result of what it ended up being. And so my #1 has actually already been mentioned, but it is the top 10 pizza franchises with Josiah Renz. And I remember walking away from that episode going, I think that may be the best episode we've ever done.
Yeah,
just
we all had that in mind.
Yeah, just as far as like each of our lists, the research that we had done, the guests we had brought on, just little nitpicky things like the audio and the quality of the banter in between us and how much room we gave each other, how much we laughed, how serious Josiah was about pizza and the process of making it and how it goes and stuff. Definitely. And then just the fact, I'm not going to spoil it, but just the fact that like our #1s and the way that ended and how it came together, it was just like, it was beautiful. And then I remember going back and like, that was one of the episodes. So the process of editing really is not super fun because I have to listen to myself talk for a certain amount of time. But I remember there have been a couple episodes that I've gone back and edited, and one of them is actually going to be released in season 3 that I had a blast. I just cackled the whole time. I was laughing. Like I'll be there editing with my headphones. My wife will be sitting next to me and I'm just like, ha ha ha, just like laughing while I'm editing. Like, man, I'm so funny. No, but Josiah was, I'm not going to rank our guests because we love all of our guests. Josiah was such a great guest. And if you want to talk about the most fitting for the content that we were releasing, he might be #1 because literally, I mean, he is Italian through and through and just brought so much. He's pizza through and through is what he is. And the like I said, as far as feedback we've gotten, I got a lot of compliments, just people kind of going out of their way to say that particular episode they really enjoyed. And I know that it got a couple people to try a couple of the places that they hadn't been to before that were on our list and stuff. And so I just had a blast with the pizza franchises episode.
That podcast was amazing. I obviously already kind of talked about it. The cheesiest of all cheesies podcast. It was a good time, and I think Josiah really enjoyed it. I don't think even he was necessarily expecting it to go as it did.
Oh, and he was ready though.
He was ready. Yeah. But yeah, no, that was a great time. And like you said, I've loved all the guests that we've had on so far, and I look to have new guests and bring some of the ones that we've already had back. Well, let me go. You want to get into honorable mentions real quick? I really only have okay.
I just have a couple.
So
all the rest of them, those are my honorable mentions.
One podcast that I'm not actually going to say anything about and what it is one that we've already recorded, but it's going to be coming out for season 3. And it involves a couple of guests who we've already had. And if that podcast was released before we did this, I would have had it on my list. Because it was a super great time, and I'm really excited for it to come out.
Yeah.
So
that's the one. That's the one I was referring to about about editing
and laughing the whole time.
Laughing. That's what I had a blast with that episode.
That's what I figured. So that one's gonna probably have to make my list for next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Ranker Fam, be on the lookout for a podcast that's apparently gonna be really funny and include 2 guests that we've had in the past come back for this podcast. So be on the lookout for that in season 3. But that one was awesome, and a good time. And there's just a couple other ones that I enjoyed. I enjoy the food ones. Honestly, the cereals one was got to be an honorable mention for me.
Yeah.
And then we did French fries. That one was really good because at the time I had not been too far removed from working at Chick-fil-A.
Right.
And so I was just like, really, like I was on a Chick-fil-A high. And so we talked about Chick-fil-A in that podcast for a little bit. And so that was a good time.
Yeah.
And then also just having other guests, like we've had Luke, we had him come and talk some, and that was a good podcast as well. Man, I don't have any written down. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head.
I'll kind of bounce with you because
cool.
So my first honorable mention, the closest to being in my top 5, was the High School Musical podcast that we actually did with my wife, and that was a really fun time, and having her on here and talking about one of my favorite movie trilogies of all time, which is the High School Musical trilogy. And that was a blast. To go off of what you were saying, the Star Wars characters episode that we had with Luke was just another outlet for me to voice my nerd. And like, what's so weird is that out of that podcast has birthed like a nerd friendship between me and Luke, because we hadn't met before. And so I actually got to collab with him and some of his stuff. Shout out to the Swanky Star Wars YouTube page. Go check that out if you're a Star Wars fan. It's really good stuff. But I got to collab with him on that, and then we've had lunch and stuff, and that was a really fun episode. Another honorable mention I had was actually The Office episode 1, just because it has to be mentioned. The Batman podcast, of course, one of the most a lot of arguing on that podcast. Me and Josh disagreed a lot more than I thought we were going to.
Surprised me.
And then another, I think this is a sleeper, but the scariest animals episode.
Yes, that's literally what I was about to say. Yes, because we had tried to kind of stay with the season. We were like, oh, like it's Halloween time. Let's do some Halloween oriented, because we did top 10 scariest animals in the world, top 10 Halloween candies, and then top 5 horror movie villains. We literally did like 3 podcasts.
We did all of those in October.
Yeah, in October. And like, the top 10 scariest animals in the world is a sleeper. And that one was actually super fun. We were sitting there like with our skin crawling the whole time talking about these animals.
Right. Because we were like, it was really a process of me and you like trying to prove to each other. I remember you would like turn your laptop and show me a picture, and you'd be like, Jacob, look at this thing. Look at this like box jellyfish or whatever. And so it was a really fun time of kind of literally stepping out of our comfort zones and having to talk about the most terrifying animals in our opinion. And the research on that was even more terrifying. So
because we had to 100% do research pretty much, because obviously we didn't know. And then I'll just say the last one, kind of a sleeper too, was when we talked about coffee.
I thought that would be in your top 5, was the coffee episode.
I actually, if there was like a 6 and a 7 on this list, it would have been there. I think I would like to maybe figure out how we could bring coffee back to the podcast in a different way. Because I think we were kind of like shaky on how we should talk about coffee. Or how we could at least turn it into a rankers list. I would say we should look back at that. But I think just talking about coffee as a whole, which is pretty much what we did, was a good time.
Yeah, it really kind of turned into, it was low key our first versus episode because we did a lot of Dunkin' versus Starbucks in that episode. And so, but no, I remember that being a huge, we both love coffee, but I think you probably are, you know, probably a little bit higher up than I am on the love of that and stuff. And so that was a passion project for you, definitely. And I enjoyed that one as well. So,
but man, you got anything else?
No, dude, I'm good. I'm solid. I'm stoked, guys. The next time you hear from us, you will be hearing from episode 1 of season 3. We're starting a new year of the Rankers podcast, and guys, we couldn't do it without you. Literally,
we could not.
Because we would just be talking to each other.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, go follow us on Instagram, please, because I mean that's where we interact with the Ranker fam the most, and we do listeners picks from here and there. So you could even suggest an episode, and we will, you know, maybe pick it or not. But
yeah, and we'll be giving an opportunity after this episode's release to hear what your favorite episode has been. And so
most definitely,
we that's our favorite part about doing this is hearing you guys interact with us about the episodes and the lists and everything. And so please continue to do that. And guys, we will see you next time in the next season.
All right, we'll see you in season 3.